Huh? Is there anything on the screen for you guys? I don't see anything on the screen. Do you see the Phillies? Okay. Well, I'm just gonna trust that this is going, even though my screen says that there's nothing going on for my PlayStation. But who cares? Hello, everybody. Welcome back to PFK the Show Legends League divisional preview, diving into the NL East this time. I think the NL East is full of the most fun teams. I'm just going to say it. I have the most fun thinking about these rosters. I had a lot of fun watching you guys draft these teams. And I think it's because there's a lot more thematic stuff going on in this division as opposed to, crafting specifically a roster that's going to synergize together. There was some more zoomed out meta thematic thought here. And I think the results are just really fun. So we're going to dive right into it with the Philadelphia Phillies. So the Phillies GM was busy for a lot of our draft making a collaboration brew with another brewery. He runs a brewery in town. And so a lot of the time it would come up to his pick and he'd be busy. And so what he'd do is he'd pop up the remaining players and look at like the top 3 or 4 guys remaining and take his favorite name from there. As the draft went on, he kept going more and more into that, just saying, I just want the highest overall rated such and such. Just give me the highest rated relief pitcher. At one point, he told me, for my next 4 picks, just take the highest rated relievers that you can find. So this team ends up having kind of the all slept on roster. Just about everybody that he picked was a guy who fell down the draft board just for any number of reasons. Maybe they had 1 or 2 attributes that weren't as desirable, or they just didn't have a name that got people as excited as other names. Who knows? But yeah, all these guys were slept on, and you could argue that he got good value with every single one of his picks because of it. So for the Phillies, going around the horn, we have Lou Gehrig at first base, with Jose Altuve at second, Cal Ripken Jr. at short, Troy Glaus at third, with Carlton Fisk behind the plate, Sammy Sosa as DH. In the outfield, got Ralph Kiner in left, Bo Jackson in center field, and Vladimir Guerrero in right. I love it. I think that team is so much fun. There's some interesting lineup construction stuff here that we'll get back to in a second, but we'll pop over and check out the Phillies pitching, which was even more so just taking the top guys available. Whitey Ford, Ed Walsh, Mordecai Brown, Andy Pettitte, and Ted Lyons in the rotation, with a couple starters out here in Jack Chesbro and Josh Johnson and Vic Willis. And then here were the 4 highest remaining relievers that he grabbed when they were available. So for me, the Phillies' best picks, whether they meant to make them or not, one of my favorites was Mordecai Brown at 14. This was a pitcher that, as I've said a lot during these divisional previews, I was surprised to watch his profile fall. Again, I think it's because the K/9 numbers aren't there. But the home run prevention and the hit prevention against a lot of these lineups, I think is going to be a lot more valuable than the draft was giving it credit for at the time. Maybe giving a little bit more value to really good strikeout or really good walk prevention. I don't know if that's going to prove to be true, but Mordecai Brown for the 14th round was a heck of a lot of value. There were pitchers going off the board at that time far lower in rating. My other favorite picks for the Phillies was Sammy Sosa in the 10th round. Not a great fielder, not a ton of speed, but we know that the home run potential is there for Sammy. 96 power right, 93 power left. The vision isn't great, so he's going to strike out a lot. He's not going to walk a lot, but again, he could thump 40 bombs, so it doesn't matter if he hits 230 and strikes out 150 times. You live with that because he's driving in a lot of runs, especially when you have Ralph Kiner and Lou Gehrig hitting in front of him. That's going to be gnarly. My other pick of the draft for the Phillies was getting Craig Biggio in the 6th round. This one elicited a lot of groans, and I think that a lot of people were sleeping on Craig Biggio's most valuable asset. It's the fact that his secondary position is catcher. So here's a guy who you can throw out as your everyday second baseman and can use to spell whoever your main catcher is. Or you can keep him as a platoon for both of those things and keep him in the lineup as a DH at times when he doesn't play. Great hitting profile in terms of contact, good enough vision and discipline, good enough fielding, good enough speed. He's just a great overall player, and he can slot in as your second catcher. So that gives the Phillies the room to maybe even drop Tony Pena if they don't feel like they need another backup catcher, and maybe add another arm or add another pinch hitter or pinch runner at the back of this lineup. Really, really slick pick. So that leads me into the lineup construction the question mark that I guess I have for this Phillies team. There's a lot of different ways that you could run this lineup specifically because of Biggio's flexibility. So the way I see it, Vlad, Gehrig, Kiner, Sosa, it's going to be hard to take them out of the lineup. Bo Jackson is your center fielder, so he's going to be in there every day. Carlton Fisk is going to be out there as often as as his knees will allow. But then the rest of the guys, I think, can be a little bit variable here. Cal Ripken Jr., good fielding shortstop, good enough hitter, but not a mega elite hitter. Troy Gloss, good enough fielder, pretty good hitter, not elite, 51 vision, he's going to K a lot. And then Jose Altuve is clearly a bat that you're going to want in your lineup every day. So what's interesting here is that Altuve can play short, and Cal Ripken can play third. So all of a sudden, I've put this together on the versus left-handed pitching screen here. All of a sudden, you can rearrange this lineup to have Ripken at third, Altuve at short, and get Biggio in at second base. Or you can slip him in at catcher and run all this stuff in an entirely different way. Plus, we're not even looking at Joe Sewell, which is another one of the guys who fell super far despite having a fantastic hitting profile without bringing much pop, but that doesn't matter. He plays shortstop and third base, two premium positions, with really good defense, with 99 vision, 95 discipline, and good contact. He could arguably be your starting shortstop, again, reconfiguring this infield. On top of all that complication, the Phillies took a lot of outfield. They've got Bryce Harper and Carl Yastrzemski just sitting here. In addition to Sammy Sosa being their DH, they've got 6 outfielders here that could all be starters. So that leads me nicely into my keys to a legendary season for the Phillies. Number one, first and foremost, is figuring out a way to maximize this depth. I think this is the deepest roster in the division and one of the deeper rosters in the Legends League because a lot of what I was just talking about, how you could work with this lineup. What I'm worried is that there's too much value sitting in places that aren't going to get enough at bats or aren't going to get enough innings at a premium position to deliver the value that they could given their great stats. So this team either needs to look into getting some platoons going where you're maximizing a guy like Yastrzemski who hits really good against righties, but you'd rather he be benched against lefties. Or seeing, I think this, if I were running the team, this is what I'd do, is see if I can leverage some of this incredible outfield depth into bolstering some other area, maybe the bullpen, maybe get one more good frontline starter, because there's just so much depth in that outfield, and there's some other areas that could need a little bit of improvement. My second key for the Phillies is that a true closer emerges from this bullpen. So as we saw, there are 3 starters out here, and you usually don't want a starter closing for you. You're wasting their good stamina, which is a lot of their value. Just doesn't make sense. So between Doug Jones, Stu Miller, Doc Crandall, and Jeff Montgomery, you've got 4 guys who are basically the same pitcher in terms of value. The question is, which one of these guys is going to emerge and actually be a good closer? I really don't know the answer to that question. It might take a couple months by committee to figure it out. It might even be a situation where you put nobody at the closer role and you do have a closer by committee. However the Phillies end up working it out, it is an absolute key that something gets figured out for how to close down those close games and secure the win. Key number 3 for the Phillies is that Lou Gehrig and Ralph Kiner, they crush more baseballs than they walk. Really, really great bats. Both of these guys, eye-popping stats, and it's going to be fun to watch them go out there and crush bombs all season. One thing that might not synergize with this lineup is the incredible discipline stat for both of these guys. Kiner with a 98 and Lou Gehrig with a 99 means they're going to be watching a lot of balls go into the catcher's mitt, and they're going to be drawing a lot of walks. With Jose Altuve and Vladimir Guerrero, or whoever is hitting 1 and 2 for this roster, hopefully getting on base and smacking the ball around a bunch, you don't necessarily want your free-swinging guys coming up for your patient guys to go and walk. That's not how you put runs across the plate. A slugger's profile more like Sammy Sosa, who's an impatient guy who's going to just hit the crap out of the ball, even if it's just a warning track fly ball, well, that's enough to score a Jose Altuve on a sac fly. So it's going to be really interesting to see how these AI batters work out. And does a Lou Gehrig have a good enough hitting profile that high discipline doesn't mean that he's walking too much to actually be the run producer that this team needs? Now, all that to say, there's nothing wrong with drawing a walk, and Sammy Sosa and Bo Jackson are fantastic protection for these guys who can then go ahead and smack that ball to the outfield. But I am a little bit worried that these guys are a little bit too patient and you don't get everything that you can out of that power. And rather than having two 45 home run guys, maybe even 50 home run guys, you've got 35 to 38 home run guys who drew 100 walks. Now you're putting a lot of pressure on Sammy and Bo Jackson to be your run producers when these guys don't run that fast. Anyway, that's really splitting hairs and, in my opinion, is a fantastic problem to have. That's it for the Phillies. Let's skip on over to, which direction are we going here? Let's go to the Nats. So the Nationals, their flavor of the team is 90s to now baseball card stars. Just about everybody on this roster is somebody I remember having a baseball card of that I loved at some point in my life, right? Guys like Derek Jeter, Ricky Henderson, Albert Bell, Giancarlo Stanton, Carlos Correa, Gary Sheffield, Chipper Jones. This is all of the really fun players that he could grab at the time, who are also, don't get me wrong, incredible baseball players. But there's certainly a extra nostalgia factor on this team, which is why I just think it's such a fun roster to look at. So the Nationals picked with the 13th pick in our draft, and let's have a look at their depth chart. I know that the Nationals GM was making changes to their depth chart just before I was going live on this stream, so I'm sorry if everything isn't quite live, but this will be kind of an approximation. Going around the horn, got Buck Leonard at first base with Alfonso Soriano at second, Derek Jeter at short, Chipper Jones at third, with Carlos Correa as a backup for those last three infield spots. Charles Johnson doing the catching with V-Mart as his backup, Albert Bell as the DH. Got a crowded outfield here with Ricky Henderson in center, Juan Soto in left, and then some kind of a platoon with Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton, Gary Sheffield, and Chino Smith trying to wedge their way into a few positions here, maybe getting some time at DH, or maybe having a three-way platoon in right field. I don't know. Like I said, I think he's still figuring out exactly what he's going to do. On the rubber, the Nationals spent their first pick on Bob Gibson to be the ace of their staff, which is going to be, again, just so much fun to watch. Got Mike Mussina, Leon Day, Ray Brown, and another baseball card to stud, Kerry Wood, looking to strike the world out. El Duque and Luis Tiant with Mark Pryor in the bullpen, going to bring a lot of strikeout power. Oh, I guess Tiant and Duque don't have as much as I figured, but Pryor sure does. Severino in there as well. And then another just fun thing that I thought the Nationals did, they took both of the guys named Cannonball and put them in their bullpen. Still trying to figure out a good nickname for this, so if anybody has some clever nicknames for the Cannonball duo, please type them into the chat. And then doing a dice roll, grabbing Jordan Hicks, absolute flamethrower, who looks prepped to walk just about 2 out of every 3 guys he faces, and then throw it past the third. So like I said, this is really a fun team, and I think that preference for nostalgia ended up forcing some really interesting picks. So I thought the Nationals' best picks, one of them was Ricky Henderson in the 3rd round. Ricky was being talked about by a couple of the drafters as early as the 1st round, and I know there was a lot of buzz about him in the 2nd. By the time the 3rd round rolled around, I didn't think that Ricky should go yet. There's a lot of high-speed guys. There's a lot of good fielding outfielders, and as we've seen, outfield is a really deep position. But we know that Ricky's a fan favorite, and he's going to do some really gnarly things on the base paths and be a great contributor while also having that fun factor of tuning in to watch Ricky Henderson, the greatest ever to do his thing, right? So Ricky Henderson in the 3rd round might have been a reach, but I still think it was one of the Nationals' best picks. If for nothing else, then he's got an incredible trade chip that somebody else might want to pay up for to be an incredible upgrade to their outfield, and it might be one of their favorite players. My second favorite pick here was Juan Soto in the 6th round. 99 discipline is all you need to know about this guy. Doesn't even really matter what the rest of your hitting stats are. If you've got 99 discipline, you're going to draw enough walks to have a high OBP, which means you're not going to be a rally killer like a lot of other guys can be. Add to that the fact that Juan Soto does have a good hitting profile, and all of a sudden this is a really, really valuable guy that was a good selection in the 6th round. And then my other favorite picks for this team was the Cannonball duo in the 20th and 21st rounds. There's some cause to be concerned about these guys as pitchers. Their main strength is in their velocity, and they've got good stamina, but they could give up a lot of hits and walks, and base runners are not necessarily your friend when you're a pitcher. Cannonball Redding might have a little bit more strikeout upside, and I guess he has 78 stamina. I didn't even see that before. Very odd for a reliever. He might be an ace out of the middle innings. We shall see. But it was a lot of value when there wasn't much bullpen value left on the board. Even though these guys don't have the highest overalls, their underlying stat profiles, I think, play up a little bit from there. Keys to a legendary season for the Nationals. Number one is that an actual playoff pitching staff emerges here. So there's no argument that Bob Gibson is an ace of aces. He could be in the Cy Young contention very easily. I'd be surprised if he wasn't. He's going to strike out well over 200 batters. I would put money on that right now. But I don't really see that two guy for a real strong playoff run. If you have a 5 or 7 game series, you're going to want to get Bob Gibson twice, but I don't think I'm shaking in my boots when Mike Messina is getting 2 appearances in a playoff game. He's going to be a great pitcher, but some of these other rosters we've seen with 399 overall starters, that's going to be hard to beat. Somebody pointed out in chat, yes, no lefties. This team has no lefty pitchers on their rotation, which could be another bit of a liability. We'll see how the Nationals management deals with that, or if that was intentional. Who knows? But back to my point about the playoff rotation emerging, I think it might be Kerry Wood. 99 Ks per 9, 91 hits per 9, 94 velocity, 90 stamina. His big bugaboo is going to be home runs and control. I think that might be okay, because he might be the kind of guy that every other game he pitches, he's just lights out. He's going to go 8 innings and allow 1 run and strike the world out. And then the other half of his games, he might give up 6 or 7. But the thing about a playoff run is this lineup is just as likely to put up 6 or 7, so it doesn't really matter that Kerry Wood has the chance to get blown up as much. I really think that these boom or bust starting pitchers are going to end up being super valuable in clutch time when you can literally put a guy like this out there and he wins the game for you by himself just because he had an on day. So I do think that a real playoff pitching staff does need to emerge from this collection of starters, or else the Nationals aren't going to be able to get the actual foothold to be a strong playoff contender once they get that playoff berth. My second key for the Nationals is that they avoid rally killers. So an interesting thing about this lineup is that there's a lot of discipline until we get... There's just a lot of discipline in this lineup. But there's also a lot of boomer bust players like your Aaron Judges, your Giancarlo Stantons, your Albert Bells, Alfonso Sorianos. A lot of these guys might end up being stumbling blocks for a rally because they are all or nothing kind of guys. I think that's true of a lot of teams in this league, but I think it's especially exacerbated by how much big thumping power is on this team that is so strikeout prone. Albert Bell being the exception here with his huge vision, but Soriano, Judge, and Stanton could combine to strike out, 450 times. I wouldn't be surprised if they got enough at bats. They could really do that really easily. And then the other thing to worry in terms of rally killers is, we know that Ricky Henderson was the greatest to ever steal a base, but I think he also leads all of history in times caught stealing. So as much as you're going to get value from stealing bases, you also don't want Ricky running you out of a rally. So between the high strikeout potential and the risk of Ricky running wild on the bases, I think this team just has to avoid rally killers, because if they do, this lineup's going to turn over like crazy. Everybody hits. There's going to be a lot of extra base hits, and it's going to be a laser show when they're on, as long as they can avoid that double play just right when the bases are loaded, right? Then my third key for the Nationals is that these corner defenders mash at an all-star level, because their defense certainly won't be. Juan Soto, I think, is a better defender in real life than he's given credit for here, but it is what it is. It's a little bit too late to fix that. Judge isn't a fantastic corner defender. Albert Bell, not a fantastic corner defender, although he'll be DHing most times. Chipper's not great. Buck Leonard's not great. Even Alfonso Soriano is a little bit of a liability defensively. Derek Jeter and Ricky Henderson are good defenders, and they're your two primary defensive positions at shortstop and center that you need to be great. Charles Johnson is a fantastic catcher behind the dish. Everybody else on this lineup is required to mash because they're not going to be bringing value with the glove. There's enough strikeout potential out of this pitching rotation that you don't need a stellar defense for this team to work right. But like I say, these corner guys are required to mash, or they need to be replaced by somebody else who will, because you're not losing any value if you're pulling them out of your defense. Alrighty, moving on to our final team of the division and the final team of our divisional preview series is the Atlanta Braves, with the other most fun theme. The Braves GM went for absolute old school players, and it's so much fun. Eddie Collins, Al Kaline, Ty Cobb, Larry Doby, Archie Vaughn. We'll look at the pitching rotation here in a second. Charlie Gehringer. So many guys from back in the day. It's just from a different era of baseball, even from the turn of the century kind of guys. And one of the things that's really cool is if you look down this roster, you'll see that the contact ratings are really high, and there's not all that much power. This is unlike everybody else in the league, prioritizing this old school type of baseball where you're just putting the bat on the ball, drawing walks, and turning the lineup over, and it's not so much about putting the ball in the seats. I think it's quite fun. So the Braves around the horn, we've got Don Mattingly at first base with Tony Perez backing him up. Eddie Collins and Charlie Gehringer forming one of the most talented but oddest platoons, since they're both lefties with the same platoon advantage, who are both elite defenders at second. I don't know how exactly this is going to work out strategy-wise, but I just think it's quite fascinating to have two ace second basemen, neither of whom has a secondary position, which is also fascinating. At shortstop, we've got Archie Vaughn backed up by Nomar Garciaparra. Ron Santo over at third with Harmon Killebrew adding some extra backup on the corners. Larry Doby out in left, Ty Cobb in center, and Al Kaline in right, with Sadaharu Oh, arguably the best power hitter out of Japan, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, who does provide the only real power threat in the middle of this lineup outside of Gary Carter. Then when we go over to the pitching side for the Braves, we'll see this old-timey baseball thing even more in stark contrast. Walter Johnson, Warren Spahn, Bob Feller, Don Sutton, and Dazzy Vance. Awesome. Got a bullpen with Robin Roberts and Jamie Moyer at the long relief, Stan Kovaleski, Wade Hoyt, Bert Blyleven in middle, and then Joe McGinnity and Bob Lemon on the back end here. A lot of these guys are starters, which might end up being a bit of a liability. As I've mentioned earlier, when you're using a high stamina guy in a one-inning role, you're not getting his most valuable stat to do you any good. We'll see if the Braves do reorganize this bullpen. This is just how the game spat it out. I didn't get any input from the Braves GM here. And there might be some adjusting or trades or pickups to do to adjust this bullpen. But what I do see here is a lot of really high overall stats. I mean, this pitching staff is stacked. 99, 99, 99, 98, 97. Got a 97 and a 96 in the bullpen with a 95. There's only one guy that starts with an 80 on this whole staff. I don't think you see that anywhere else in the league. So for me, the best picks for the Braves, the first was taking Bob Feller in the 6th round. The Braves GM had reached out to me before the draft and was mentioning just what a badass Bob Feller was. He was just absolutely dominant when he was playing the game, went over and fought in World War II, I believe it was, and then came back and was just equally as dominant. Just a really cool badass of a man throughout his whole life. And so I knew that the Braves would be targeting him. Getting him in the 6th round is really something else. 99 stamina, 99 Ks per 9, 99 clutch. Hits per 9 is at 95, throws hard as hell. The only worry there is that walks per 9 at 48. We've talked about before that one stat being way down can be a liability. There's going to be some games where he issues 6 walks, and you don't know if he's going to be able to come back from that. But here's the thing with Feller. 48 walks per 9, 99 clutch. That means that he gets better when there's runners on base. So all of a sudden, maybe he'll walk one guy to start an inning and then all of a sudden lock down and strike out the next 3. I really think that in the 6th round, that was huge value that a lot of people were scared off because of that one stat. On the offensive side, I thought Sadaharu O in the 8th round was really good. One of the best batting profiles that was still on the board. High discipline is valuable, though when he's your main run producer in the cleanup spot, you'd like him to swing the bat and actually drive those runs in. But he's got that 89 clutch. Doesn't start with a 9, so it doesn't catch your eye as much, but that's just, almost as good as a 90. O was a really, really great pick where he fell in the 8th round. And then late in the draft, with his 21st pick, grabbing Harmon Killebrew, 98 power against both hands of pitcher. The vision's a little low, so he's going to strike out. The clutch is high, but that means bring him in as a pinch hitter when the bases are loaded in the 8th inning, and Killebrew's going to knock a few clutch home runs over the wall, and that's going to be fun to watch. So my keys for the Braves, I do think, for what it's worth, that this rotation and defense is the best in the division. As we scroll down and look at all these defensive numbers, everybody is good or great. There was one guy there, Larry Doby isn't, super amazing in left, but when you've got Ty Cobb and Al Kaline patrolling center and right, you don't have to worry as much about your left fielder covering a lot of ground. That's okay. So the keys, number one is that pitching and defense is as good in this game as it can be in real life. The Braves have put a lot on their pitching and good defense actually carrying the full breadth of the season and being their secret weapon in the playoffs. In real life, we've seen that work time after time where a strong pitching and defense team is just dominant. I don't know whether or not this strategy will work in game, especially up against lineups that have, Barry Bonds or Babe Ruth or Ken Griffey Jr. Ty Cobb is a really, really great first pick that they took off the board and kind of set the standard for this team that we're going to play good defense, we're going to run like crazy, and we're going to put the bat on the ball. We don't need to put the ball over the fence. So if it's true that that strategy does play out well in the show, then this team is going to be an absolute threat for an NLCS run. My second key for this game is that run production comes from the top to the bottom of this lineup because they don't have the stereotypical boppers in the middle of their lineup. As we looked before, everybody in this lineup has incredible contact skills. They're going to be getting on base a lot, and they're going to be putting the bat on the ball. If we look at everybody's vision as well, great vision stats. I think the lowest so far was 81. I guess Santo has a 70, but he has good discipline, so he's not going to be swinging at that many bad pitches. All these guys have great vision, so they're not going to be striking out a ton. What this means to me is that we're going to have a lot of runners on base and not a whole lot of extra base hits. So the run production has to come from somewhere. You've got guys on first and second. Well, if you get a single, is that necessarily scoring a run? I think that the run production really has to come from the bottom to the top. Don Mattingly's going to have to drive in 65 or 70 runs. So is Larry Doby. So is Archie Vaughn at the bottom of this lineup. If everybody can do that and have good but not great RBI totals, then this team is going to score runs by the bunches, and it's going to be really annoying to try to get them out when nobody on this roster is willing to strike out. And then my third and maybe most important key for the Braves here is that Bob Feller is an ace more than 50% of the time. Like some of these other pitchers, I think I mentioned that he's at risk of having some blow-up games. He walks 6 guys, they put up 5 earned runs in 3 innings, what do you do now? I think you live with that because I think that this guy is capable of delivering some of those absolute shutout performances, especially with that stamina. He's going to be able to go complete games and win you baseball games all by himself. If he's that ace quality more than 50% of the time, that's your third starter. And you've got Warren Spahn and Walter Johnson just crushing it as your 1 and 2, and Don Sutton right behind him. Let's not forget, he's a pretty good pitcher too. If Bob Feller is an ace more than 50% of the time, then this becomes in the argument for best rotation in the Legends League. Definitely best rotation in the division. So all of that adds up to my prediction that says that the Atlanta Braves will take this division. The biggest threat here is that this defense, pitching, and high contact skill just can't out-bop the boppers, and that huge home run teams just become the meta in this league. That's totally possible. I think that it's going to be a lot more nuanced than that. I think that this Legends League is going to end up being almost rock, paper, scissors, where if you bring in a high contact lineup against some of these strikeout heavy pitching staffs, like we just looked at the Blue Jays, who are going to be striking people out like crazy, then all of a sudden the Braves can really overwhelm a pitching staff that relies on the strikeout. However, going up against one of the other pitching staffs that doesn't get many Ks and wants to induce weak contact, all of a sudden the Braves are just going to be swinging spaghetti noodles, and it's not going to be actually turning into runs. Because of that rock, paper, scissors aspect that I'm guessing is going to play out over the course of the season, I think the Braves have made the against the grain call. They're going to end up winning a lot more of those close matchups than a lot of these other teams will that invested more in power or invested more in elite defense or invested more in strikeouts. That's just my personal opinion. We have no idea what's going to happen, and I think that this is going to be so much fun to watch. We're going to close the stream down. We're going to look at some minor leagues and look at the other teams in this division. If you're on the chat and you want to see any other players' stats or anything, go ahead and send them to me right now. I'm trying to read through, see if there's anything I missed. 99 not handsome. Oh man, I wonder who they were talking about there. So the other teams in our division here, along with guys who played prominently for the Marlins, we are turning Miami into the party team. So guys who liked to have a good time, maybe threw back a few cold ones. Maybe Wade Boggs would be on this team if he wasn't already drafted for his ability to put back a few brews. So we're hoping that all these guys can go together to Miami and just have a great time. Just have so much fun. And our other cupcake team in the NL East is the New York Mets. And I think like many people out there, I think that the Mets are a lovable team to make fun of. And so the suggestion that one of my PFK league mates gave to me is that we turn the Mets into the all-hype team. And we give them all the guys who have really big names, but somehow didn't make the cut of being, like Adrian Gonzalez isn't quite good enough to make one of these Legend League rosters as a stud DH or first baseman, but he's a big enough name that he's going to be great on the Mets. Same with Jose Bautista and David Justice. Of course, you got to put Bobby Bonilla on the Mets. That's really important. I also wanted to give them Carl Crawford and both Upton brothers so that at least in their AAA, we could see what an outfield of B.J. Upton, Justin Upton, and Carl Crawford looked like, just for fun. And we see Dave Magadan and Lucas Duda and Asdrubal Cabrera all on a team here in AA. And then looking at the minor leagues for these other guys, here's the Phillies. Ryan Howard hanging out down in AAA, trying to prove he still belongs, hitting in front of Bobby Abreu. And Shane Victorino there on the bench. I hope he has his both ears on his batting helmet. And our AA for the Phillies. And then we're going over to the Nats minor leagues. The Nationals is another one of these teams that had a lot of guys who were right on the fringe that didn't get drafted, that I had to go send to other teams so that the rest of the league was well balanced. And the Nationals didn't have just an incredible AAA team. World Series prediction, man. Okay. I think I mentioned to you all that I went through and I've done a couple different tiers of assessing all of your rosters. First, I went through and just did a total biased, prejudiced look at everybody's rosters just based on names. I wrote all the teams down, and started taking notes and started giving everybody grades like B+ rotation, A- lineup, whatever. And then I went back and I put all those values into Excel and saw who I actually thought was the best whatever. And already after doing this deeper dive, looking at everybody's stats, I completely disagree with all of my rankings already, which is hilarious. But I've planted my flags, and damn it, I'm going to stick by my flags. So I think that, yeah, screw it. I'll just share all these predictions with you. So, yeah, my World Series prediction as of right now is the Atlanta Braves versus the Detroit Tigers. Both of the rosters seem to be full of enough talent that they're going to get that high level, Cy Young, MVP, Silver Slugger, Gold Glove type runs from a few players. And I think that the rosters work together synergistically in a way that isn't just going to produce a playoff berth, but can also fight through those 5 and 7 game series in the playoffs and lead them to the World Series. Then, oh man, I have written down here that the Tigers take the World Series, and yeah, I think I'm going to stick to it. I think the Detroit Tigers are my current pick as World Series champs, and that's just my opinion. I also made early and irresponsible picks for MVP. I think that the AL MVP is going to be Ted Williams. The NL MVP will be Willie Mays. The Cy Young in the AL is going to be Roger Clemens, and the NL Cy Young is going to be Bob Gibson. And that's all I've got for predictions. Cool. Thank you all for joining me for this division series, or division preview series. It's been a lot of fun to go through all this stuff. Tomorrow is a day off while I finish all of the roster tinkering, because the next day we start this thing. June 24th, spring training begins. So waivers are going to open on the 23rd. They're due by 12 p.m. Pacific time, or 12 a.m., midnight, tomorrow night. And then I will process the waivers the next morning. During the season, we're going to run weekly waivers. They will normally be due at midnight on Sunday, and then I will process them Monday morning. Doing more than weekly waivers would just be too much work for me because y'all are animals. But I do want to do an actual waiver system after realizing how much roster turnover could happen in this league. Please be encouraged to make trades. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for you guys to swap some players around and really have win-win trades. And it's just fun to watch people make trades. So do that, please. So like I said, spring training begins on the 24th. And we're still going with the Playing for Keeps regular league. So I'm not going to be doing any streams. And I'm actually not going to be sharing box scores from spring training. What I will be doing is I will be simming a few days of action every day. And then I will be updating you on a stream with your individual players' stats from your team. So you can keep track of, oh, you know, Derek Jeter started out hitting 200, but he's got his average up to 300 by the second week or something like that. And then you'll also see how the standings are working out. So you can see generally how your team is doing. But we won't be doing deep dives on box scores yet. And then July 4th is opening day. And we're gonna do this thing. We're going to see who wins this World Series, and I'm so excited. All right, y'all, I'm going to call it a night, and I will see you in 2 days for spring training. Get me your waiver claims by tomorrow. Later.